So numbers there, analysis now on this and more from Brandon Daniels, CEO at Exiger, which is a supply chain technology company, does do work, as we've talked to Brandon about in the past, with the federal government. And I want to talk about some of that and how the supply chains are changing and even maybe the war and the stockpile concerns. But first, on the economy, big picture, I ran through some of the numbers. How do you see things? How do your clients see things right now?
So when I look at the economic data, the points that you made around the PCE, the points that you made around domestic consumption, I think are leading indicators of overall sort of purchasing sentiment changing. And that's going to be a leading indicator for gross domestic product increases. Right now, you have to have the demand, and the demand has not been there as we've seen price volatility, and we've particularly seen the acute effects of gas volatility in the United States put a downward pressure on purchasing. And so, the supply chains are such that they can actually accommodate and react to those consumption models on an ongoing basis. So people are, keeping more in the warehouse. They're not producing as much. They're not showing new balance sheet increases. That will catch up with this spending capability or this spending capacity growth that we've seen happen over this last quarter. And I believe that our GDP numbers will actually rebound.
Okay, so positive for the most part looking forward. I feel like your area of expertise with supply chains, and I mentioned your experience in working with the federal government on some of these contracts and other things, it makes you a very, very interesting person to ask, rather than, the generals and others who are also interesting to talk to, that we've been having this conversation about our stockpiles when we cover the war. So I have this screen here about interceptors, the missile interceptors, and it shows, the Patriots and the THAADs and what we had pre-war at the ceasefire and a July number. It's from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So what would you add to the conversation that we should be having behind the numbers, and how this situation might right itself, how big of a concern it is, how it kind of all works if we do need to add to our missile stockpiles and interceptors?
The war puts pressure on the United States military supply chains, in particular munitions supply chains, on two fronts. The first front is the ability to get goods. So we have a constrained set of feedstocks that allow us to actually produce munitions. And a lot of that is actually foreign born. Even like the maritime industrial base, Connell, it's really dependent on a specific type of aggregate, which is the core of concrete. And that aggregate is really only manufactured today or produced in Southeast Asia. Okay. And so our ability to produce ships inside of essentially manufacturing facilities that can, or ports that can weather material erosion, is limited without this aggregate. So there are constraints on the supply chain to expand our maritime industrial base, to expand our munition stockpiles that are foreign born. So the war hits us.
Because of that, we can't just snap our fingers and solve this.
And the war makes the logistics of it and the purchasing of it actually harder. The second thing is, we are at the very beginning of an enormous wave of defense investment. You just saw $53 billion actually awarded to Lockheed Martin. That $53 billion will now go out to their contractors, their subs, as long-term purchases.
Long-term, right.
Those long-term purchases will actually start to drive up, or actually re-engage what were once hot lines into warm lines, that were once hot lines, have gone cold over the last 2 decades, make them warm lines and hot lines again. So we are looking at a pretty significant ramp in defense production, but right now we're very constrained. And so that constraint is going to mean that those THAADs, those Patriot capabilities, are not going to be replenished as quickly as we need. So what the government is doing in parallel is they're creating low-cost interceptor, low-cost drone warfare, low-cost attritable weapon system capabilities that are going to offset our ability to bear with the ramp.
We've seen from Iran how effective those low-cost drones, especially, have been for them, and now we're trying to combat some of that. We spend so much on these interceptors. Really interesting to get into this and actually understand how it works. Thank you, Brandon.